So welcome to our webinar on Community Food Project's application process. My name is Sarah Lambertson, and I'm the National Technical Assistance Manager at New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. We received a training and technical assistance grant from the USDA to support applicants and grantees of CFP. So in addition to webinars such as this one, we provide one-on-one TA. We're going to be reviewing the application process for CFP and going over some of the nuts and bolts of the process. But if you encounter a serious technical issue while you're submitting your application, I really encourage you to reach out to Grants.gov technical support. We're not able to provide that sort of support, so please make sure that if you are really having an issue like that, that you reach out to Grants.gov. So just take a quick look at our agenda here. We're going to do a very brief technical overview and then take a look at the Grants.gov process, as well as talk about the application process. Package, excuse me, and finish up with questions and resources at the end. So first of all, who is New Entry? We do on-the-ground work here in Massachusetts with farmer training and food access. We have a couple of teams here, including a food hub, as well as an incubator farm and farmland matching service. And our national team provides support to food systems organizations, those working directly with farmers, as well as those working with consumers supporting those farmers. As I mentioned before, we have a training and technical assistance grant from the USDA to support applicants and grantees of CFP. So that's specifically what this work is for. We have some resources available. If you haven't taken a look at our website before, I recommend that you do so. We've got lots of helpful links and documents there. You'll also see there that you can request assistance, one-on-one assistance. We do offer free one-on-one assistance to CFP applicants and grantees. We have past webinars on there as well. You're also welcome to send me an email. My email address is there on the screen. So we're going to start out by talking about the process for submitting an application through Grants.gov. So if you've never applied for a federal grant before, or if you've never used Grants.gov, it's really important to make sure that you are familiar with all the steps in the process and that you're prepared to submit the application. This process can take as long as 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how many steps you need to do. So this is really something to make sure you're ready to do now, not when you're preparing to actually submit the application. So first thing is you're required to have a DUNS number from Dun & Bradshaw. And I'm going to go do an overview of the process, and then I'm going to talk about each of these steps in a little more depth. So that process takes a couple of days, about 3 to 5 days. Once you've received that, you use your DUNS number and you apply for the System for Award Management, and you receive a number there, and you appoint an eBiz point of contact, and that also takes about 3 to 5 business days. From that point on, the eBiz point of contact appoints an authorized organizational representative. That AOR registers on Grants.gov, and then the eBiz point of contact confirms the AOR's registration. Now, a really important part of submitting your application is being aware that that AOR's username and password is required when you submit the application. So it's really important to make sure that whoever is submitting it knows that username and password and is able to put that information in, because that, if you don't have that at the last minute, unfortunately, you won't be able to submit your application. So the DUNS number. This is something you only need to do once. The website is there, and I'll send that in a link at the end of the webinar. It takes 3 to 5 days to receive your number, and there's no fee. But if you've never done this before, it's really important to start here. You won't be able to do the rest of the process without your DUNS number. Registering for the System for Award Management. So this can take up to 2 weeks if you don't yet have your employer identification number. If you do have your employer identification number, it's typically 3 to 5 business days. This does need to be renewed annually. So even if you have received this in the past, please make sure that this is up to date for this year and that it will be up to date through the end of the application period, which is November 30th, 2016. So that's really important to make sure that's up to date. Again, no fee to register. You do need your DUNS number to apply, so you can't do this simultaneously. You need to wait until you've received your DUNS number. And at this point, you appoint your eBiz point of contact within your organization. From there, the eBiz point of contact appoints your AOR. The AOR is the person who registers with Grants.gov. As I mentioned before, the AOR's username and password are required to submit a grant. We unfortunately have heard stories of organizations putting in countless hours of work, getting all of their attachments uploaded in their budget into Grants.gov, and then unfortunately not having the proper username and password at the last minute and not being able to submit the grant. So please, I cannot stress enough how important it is to make sure that you have that information and that it is up to date so that you're able to submit. So the eBiz point of contact confirms the AOR's registration, and after that point, the AOR is able to submit applications. All right, so that's all what you need to make sure that you've either started the process or that process has already been done so that you're able to actually submit the grant. So now when you go to Grants.gov, you can see here this is a screenshot. In the upper right-hand corner, I've circled in red where you register. So that is, once you've gone through the steps prior to the registration, that's where you can register on Grants.gov. And then you can, the search bar just below that, you can either search for community food projects, and you can see I've highlighted the opportunity in red. You can also use the funding number, funding opportunity number, which is down here below, to search for the grant. But either way, once you've found it, the Community Food Projects Competitive Grant Program, you click on the opportunity number over there on the left. So the application package you actually need to download from Grants.gov, and I'll show you just in a moment where that comes from. What you're downloading is a PDF that has live links to Grants.gov. You need to make sure you have a current version of Adobe Reader, and it's very helpful to have a PDF generator so that you're able to combine multiple PDF documents. They do require that all attachments are in PDF form, and I'll go through some of the other requirements for the attachments a little later on, but you do need to have everything in PDF form. If you're having trouble downloading, some people have trouble downloading the package, just try switching browsers. Sometimes one browser works better than the other, so try switching browsers before you need to contact Grants.gov, but certainly contact them if you're having trouble. It is very important to submit early. So these grant packages can be extremely large, and on the day of a big grant being due, there tend to be a lot of people submitting, and if your internet is slow or if Grants.gov is having any issues, and if you are submitting late, unfortunately, it will not be reviewed. Also, Grants.gov checks for errors right before you submit, and you want to make sure you have time to fix them. So if you're really rushing to do this at the last minute and it discovers a small error that you're not able to finish in time, unfortunately, you won't be able to submit it. We really recommend that you submit it a few days before the deadline. I'll talk about a couple of emails you get later on, but sometimes you'll be able to submit it without issue, but they'll realize there's a validation error once you've submitted it. If you've done that before the deadline, you'll be able to go back in and fix it. If it's past the deadline, unfortunately, you can't fix it. So the deadline this year is November 30th, 2016 at 5 p.m. Eastern. Just be aware that's about a week after Thanksgiving, so just have that in your mind as you're doing your project planning. So as I was mentioning before, to download the package, when you click on that opportunity number, it brings you to this page here. The first thing I want to point out in red, it says send me change notification emails. That's probably a good idea to sign up there. That's just in case there's any changes to the RFA or the deadline or anything pertinent to this application. So probably a good idea. And then to actually download the package, you click on the tab up there that says package, and that allows you to download it. So first thing, when you open up the PDF, you'll see here there's a Show Instructions hyperlink. So if you click on that, it will give you multiple instructions about using the form, mostly just helpful reminders, but definitely important to take a look at that before you start doing the form. So the first thing to fill out is the SF-424. This is one of the first pages in the application. It's important to do this first because once you've done this, it will actually autofill a couple of other fields throughout. So it's really nice to have that done. You can see that up top, there's the pre-application, application, and changed or corrected application is in yellow with red around it. That is required. And then you can see in the other boxes, some are just blue. Those are not required fields. They might be required for another grant, but not for this one. But all the fields that have a red tint to them with the outline, those fields are all required to be able to submit the application. So they won't let you submit it. Grants.gov won't let you submit it if any of those fields are left blank. So the budget form is one really important thing to be aware of. For this round of applications that you're applying for right now, the start date for these grants is going to be September 1st, 2017. So that should be the start date for your first budget period. And then the end date for each budget period is going to be August 31st of the next year. You do one budget year at a time, one budget period. So if you're applying for the full grant, which is 4 years, you'll need to have 4 different budget periods. And I'll show you in a moment how you do that. But as I mentioned earlier, with the red boxes, with the outline, those are all the required boxes. So there's multiple different pages to each budget period. So you want to make sure that you've filled in all the appropriate information for each budget period. So you start out with your senior and key personnel and putting in your salary information. You put in equipment, and you can see here where it says equipment item and then it says federal dollars and non-federal dollars. The federal dollars are your request from CFP. So there, that's where you put the amount for that particular item that you're requesting. Non-federal dollars, that's your match. So they want to make sure that this grant program has a dollar for dollar match. So if you're requesting $400,000, you need to have $400,000 of match documented. It can be cash or in kind, but you do need to have it documented in this budget here, as well as with appropriate supporting documentation. So when you get to the bottom of the budget form for period 1, first thing you can see on the first page, where on the left here, I've highlighted the budget justification. You do need to add an attachment there. So please make sure that you have your budget justification, and that's for the entire 4-year period. If you're applying for 4 years, it's uploaded there. If everyone can please make sure that they're muted. We've got some background noise. So the other really important thing down here on the budget page is after the budget justification, over here on the right-hand side, I've also circled it in red, it says add period. So if you're only applying for 1 year of funding, you don't need to worry about that. But if you're applying for 2, 3, 4 years of funding, you do need to press add period, and it's going to bring up the same sheet again, but it'll say budget period 2. So you need to do that for each year of the grant that you're applying for. There's also a couple of other places where you need to upload files. So here, number 7, again, they're highlighted in red, and in the application packet, you can see it's yellow with a red outline. So you can upload your project summary or abstract, and as I mentioned before, as a PDF, your project narrative gets added there as well. And then field 12 down there is not highlighted in red, but there are required documents to upload there, such as your key support letters from partners, your match documentation, and there's a couple of other items that are mentioned in the RFA that need to be attached there. So even though that is not read in the application, please be sure to upload all the appropriate documents there because they are required. Another spot, so in the budget you have your senior and key personnel are separate from your other personnel. Further down in the application you actually need to kind of put in a bunch more information for those senior and key personnel so that the USDA can review their credentials and make sure that they are appropriate as the PD or other personnel. So you need to have various information about them as well as their biographical sketch and their current and pending. And current and pending is looking at their any federal funding they're currently receiving or any federal funding they are pending to receive, just so that they can make sure that you are not committed over 100% of your time. Another really important thing to be aware of on the application package is the program code. This is towards the end, but you want to make sure that you fill in the program code name, which is Community Food Projects Competitive Grant Program, and the program code. If you don't have this program code in there, unfortunately, your application may not make it to NIFA. It may float around in the Grants.gov system, so this is really important. And you can see down here below the two program codes. If you're applying for the full implementation grant, the program code is LN.C. If you're applying for the planning project, it is LN.B. So again, it's very important to make sure you've filled in your program codes. So as I mentioned earlier, this PDF has live links to Grants.gov. So this screenshot is from the first page, and you can see that there's a save button. Save and submit is grayed out right now because you can't do that until you do the check package for errors. So when you're working on this throughout, I recommend saving frequently, just in case you have any issues with it. When you are getting ready to submit, you press the check package for errors. That's going to go through and make sure that you have filled in all the required fields. It will check through your budget and make sure that your numbers add up. So it's really important to give yourself some time in case there are any issues that it finds. Sometimes it's an easy fix. Sometimes it requires going through your entire budget and making sure that all of your numbers match up. So definitely not something you want to be doing scrambling against the clock. Last thing is to press save and submit after you've checked it for errors, and that is submitting it to Grants.gov. As I mentioned earlier, at that point, you'll need to enter the AOR's username and password. So really important to make sure that you have it. If you don't have it, you will not be able to submit it, and you will be sad. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some specific requirements for the attachments for the PDFs that you're attaching. So first thing is in the contents of them. Anything that you're submitting needs to be no smaller than 12-point font, and there needs to be at least 1 inch of margins. And again, this is in the NIFA Grants.gov application guide, which if you haven't downloaded it or taken a look at, I highly recommend. There's a lot of important information in there. You need to number each page of the attachment sequentially. And this particular RFA has a specification that the narrative is only 10 pages with up to 5 pages of tables and figures. So you need to adhere to all of those guidelines. The file format, they require that it be in PDF form. So just not allowed to do any Word documents. It will not be accepted. For the file name, there are a couple of criteria. It needs to be limited to 50 characters. It may not include any special characters or periods or blank spaces, though you may use underscores in the file name. And then the last thing is make sure that there are no passwords or there's nothing protected about it. And this is really important if your files don't meet all of these criteria. You are risking not having your proposal reviewed or your application reviewed. So it's really important to make sure that you're reviewing it. Again, page 9 of the NIFA Grants.gov application guide. So after you click submit, the AOR will receive 5 emails that it has been submitted, that it has been validated, that it has been retrieved by NIFA, received by NIFA, and then received by NIFA with a grant number a few days later. So it's definitely important to make sure that if you are the person who's putting this together, but you are not the AOR, that you've given them heads up that you're submitting this so they can keep an eye out for these emails. If you receive an email that it has not been validated and you're still before the deadline, you are able to go back in and update it. So that's one really important factor in submitting early, is that it allows you to track that, to go back and fix that. And then that grant number that it gives you, you're able to track your application through Grants.gov, which I will show you a little bit more about in just a moment. So here, this is back on the main Grants.gov page, and there are tabs up at the top. And so if you hover over the Applicant tab, you can click Track My Application. And this will allow you to track your application through the entire Grants.gov system up until it is in the hands of NIFA and confirmed that it has been received. So that just gives you some peace of mind. You won't be able to see where it is in the review process once NIFA has it. So there will definitely be a bunch of time where they have it and you don't know yet, but at least you can confirm that they've received it. I also wanted to let you know about a new tool on Grants.gov called Workspace. This is a tool that allows you to collaborate on an application. So multiple users can share the application package so that you don't need to be emailing the entire package back and forth, which can sometimes be a little nerve-wracking if you have different versions of it or if there's any issues with emailing the package. So this is definitely helpful. All collaborators do need to have a Grants.gov account. So you need to make sure that everyone has one under the same organization name before you're able to do this. But this is something new this year that might be helpful for you if you have a lot of people working on the application. So there also are a lot of helpful resources on Grants.gov. I'll send these links out to you once I send out the recording. But if you also just search on the web, training videos from Grants.gov, so they can give you a lot of helpful guidance. And as I mentioned earlier, the Grants.gov support, if you're having technical issues with Grants.gov, please reach out to them. Unfortunately, we won't be able to help you with that, and nor will NIFA. So it's really important to make sure that Grants.gov is able to support you there. I also just briefly wanted to mention, we're not going into a lot of depth about the narrative, but just wanted to mention the different sections that are required in the project narrative. Again, this is in the RFA with a lot of detail. If you haven't read the RFA yet, I really, really encourage you to do so. But just wanted to mention these topics and to mention again that the narrative needs to be no longer than 10 pages. So the communities to be involved and the needs addressed, and then the organizations and communities involved. It's really important in these two segments here to talk about the level of community engagement that you've had in the planning process, as well as how the community members are going to be involved throughout. This is something that's really important to CFP, and I know many people who have had really strong proposals, but they're lacking in this area, and that's the reason that they don't get the grant. So I really encourage you to take the time to really engage the community and find a meaningful way to incorporate their thoughts into the narrative. Then project goals and intended outcomes, as well as your activities to achieve the outcomes. And then the relationships to the program objectives, which is making sure that your project relates to CFP. And then there's two sections that are only for the implementation grant, not for the planning project, which are the evaluation section and the self-sustainability section. So again, there's a lot more detail on all of these in the RFA, but I just wanted to mention them in case you hadn't seen those different sections before. I also just wanted to mention a few key considerations in thinking about applying for CFP. It is a very competitive grant program. Last year they awarded 18% of the applicants, so they receive a lot of applications each year. And I would anticipate that the percentage would be pretty similar this year. So you really want to make sure that you are putting together a strong proposal and strong application because it's very competitive. This program does have a dollar-for-dollar match, which means that for every dollar of federal funds that you request, you need to be able to provide documentation for that amount of funding in match. And that can be cash or in kind. And there are various different ways that that can be met, but really important to think about as you're applying. As I just mentioned a moment ago, the community collaboration is very, very key. So if this is something where you're hoping to apply this year but haven't engaged your community yet, I would really think long and hard about whether or not you're going to be able to engage them effectively before the application deadline. And if you're not able to do so, it may be best to start that process now and apply next year, unless you think that you really are able to engage them and get some meaningful input from them. And then the last is just partnerships. They really want to see applications coming from, the lead applicant needs to be a nonprofit, but various partners, they can be for-profit, local government, they can be other nonprofits. They just really want to see that you're working with other organizations in your community. So as I mentioned, we have other resources on our website, so I encourage you to take a look there. And if you are looking for one-on-one support, there's a request for assistance form on our website, which I will also send after the webinar, and we are happy to help. So please feel free to send that, fill that out if you have any need for support from us. And at this point, I will take any questions that you have. If you're able to put them into the chat window, that would be great. It looks like we've got some questions already, so I will get started on those. So the first question is, can the AOR be the same person as the eBiz point of contact? Yes, I believe so. I don't see any reason why they can't be the same. Someone asked if they can get a copy of the presentation. I will email it out after the webinar. Does match have to occur in the same budget year? That's a great question. No, I don't believe so. I believe that you just need to have the full amount of match verified up front for the 4 years, but that it doesn't need to be matching with the exact dollar amount that you're requesting in that given year. For multiple year grants, do you need a budget justification for each period or just one budget justification? You only need one budget justification, but it does need to show the breakdown by year for what you're requesting. So, but it is only one document that you upload just that one time. Katrina mentioned a best practice to save the live link PDF to your desktop, not in a folder, and she uses Internet Explorer. So I've also found Internet Explorer to be helpful. So thank you, Katrina, that's great. Kay, is there an option to print the application before submitting? I believe so, yeah. I think that you can go up to the, like you would normally in a PDF, go up to the file up in the upper left-hand corner, and you should be able to print like a normal PDF document. Someone is asking for acceptable types of in-kind match. There are a lot. So I think the general guideline is that anything that is an allowable expense for the grant program is allowable as match. So if it's something that you could write into the budget, but you have it, either you're going to pay for it out of non-federal funds or a partner is going to supply it, then it can be used as match. Examples are volunteer time is a great form of in-kind match. So you can look up the federal sort of accepted guidelines for dollar amount for volunteer time, and based on number of volunteers that you typically have, you can put in volunteer time at that rate for a certain number of hours. And it needs to be equivalent to the work that they're doing, not their normal rate of pay. You also can have partner in-kind time. So if a partner is willing to donate their time, you're able to do that. You can use staff time as well if it's above and beyond what's written into the grant, although it cannot be originating, their salary can't come from federal funds. So with any of the match that you're using, it can't originate as federal funding in any way. So that's one really important consideration. So there's definitely a lot more about match. If you want to reach out to me and we can have a conversation about the things that you're thinking about, I would encourage you to do that. Someone asked, if awarded, will funding go out? Carolyn, I'm not totally sure what you mean. If you don't mind just giving a little bit more information about that, that would be great. All right, someone asked if local government can be the lead applicant. Excuse me. No, local government is not eligible as the lead applicant, only nonprofits, though local government could be a great partner. They just need a nonprofit to apply. One question, I read your guideline packet that projects should be new, not ongoing already. However, there's a need to justify the project's invalidity. How do you balance a newer project? That's a great question. So I think it comes from a couple of different ways. One, the past experience of the applicant organization is definitely really important. So if the applicant organization has never done something like this before, it's going to be a tough case for the reviewers to really feel confident that they are going to be able to do it. But if you've done similar types of projects or have been working in in the food system for a while, that's definitely really important. And then the other really big one is the community need. So if you are, this is a new project, but you can demonstrate that there's community need for it, that's huge and really, really important for this. So I would say really thinking about the past experience of the applicant organization and then the community that's being served. Someone asked what types of government organizations typically apply. Unfortunately, government organizations are not eligible to apply, only nonprofits. So if you have a government agency that is interested in partnering with a nonprofit, that's great, but they are not able to be the lead applicant. So for the salary personnel background section, how do you handle it if you would be hiring an individual for the position? That's a great question. So what you would likely need to do is put in your expected salary range and a title. They may withhold the funding until you have identified that person and sent in a resume. That's only for key personnel. If it's a person who's in the other personnel category, you're not required to submit a resume for them, so that would be fine. But it really would only be if it was a key personnel. I would say you'd need to identify a project director at the time of application. So if you identified one, received the grant, and hired someone and wanted to switch, you need to request approval for that through NIFA, but you need to first make sure that you have someone on staff who can serve in that project director role. And other roles, I'd say you could put in the justification, budget justification that you're going to hire them, and then just submit the resume once they've been hired. The slides, I will email them out to everyone after the webinar is done, so you'll have access to these slides. Someone's asking when the funding will go out in September if awarded. So for the applications right now that you're applying for, they're due November 30th. They'll be reviewed sometime this winter or spring, and those that are recommended for award will likely be contacted sometime in June or so. And then next summer, they will go through the awards management division process, which involves verifying match and making sure budget is appropriate and all those sorts of things. and the start date for the grants should be September 1st, 2017. This is a reimbursable grant, so you pay upfront and you get reimbursed for the funding. So, you know, you're able to start spending it once you have been awarded it. I'm not sure how long it takes to actually get funds into your account, but I would anticipate that I wouldn't necessarily assume you'd have them available immediately, because sometimes it can take a little while to get it all set up. We are a project of the city funded by the state, but our fiscal sponsor is a 501c3 project, nonprofit. Are we able to apply as a lead but use them as a fiscal sponsor, or do they or another 501c3 need to be the lead? That's a great question. I would say if your fiscal sponsor is a nonprofit, that they would be able to apply. But I'm a little unsure with the situation of being funded by the state. I think that that's okay, but I might recommend that you reach out to the program director, Jane Clary, and just verify with her that that's okay. But I believe as long as your fiscal sponsor is a 501c3, that should be okay. Can organizations apply with state nonprofit ID but not 501c3 designation with the IRS? I believe that you're required to be a federally recognized nonprofit, so I think that you really do need to have the designation with the IRS. Again, you can clarify that with Jane Clary, but I'm pretty sure it needs to be federal. Can you purchase land with the funding? Land, I believe, is one of those budget expenses that requires prior approval. So I think it is potentially possible, though it's definitely much more challenging than if you were to, say, rent land. I would encourage you to reach out to Susan Bowman and Adrian Wooden at NIFA to discuss that, because I believe that's a prior approval. Can you purchase greenhouses? Sometimes these are considered permanent. I think a greenhouse would probably fall into the same category as land, because construction is allowable, though requires prior approval. So I think the safest bet would be to request approval on that, although I'm not specifically sure. Hoop houses, I think hoop houses would be okay since they are not as permanent structures. All right, well, I don't see anything coming through, so I just want to say thank you to all of you for participating today, and encourage you to reach out if you have any questions or need any support throughout the process. We are here to help, so please don't hesitate, and thank you for joining today.